The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody saw coming. "I don't serve cruelty, ma'am. Only coffee and kindness." Alexander's voice wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, but it cut through the elegant dining room of Lou Bernardine with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midair. Even the soft jazz playing in the background seemed to hold its breath. Standing behind table 12, Alexander Chun held a silver coffee pot in one hand and what remained of his composure in the other. His black uniform was pressed, his white shirt spotless, but his heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Across from him sat Sophia Kellerman, tech mogul, venture capitalist, and according to Forbes, the most powerful woman under 40 in the country. Her emerald dress probably cost more than Alexander's monthly rent, and her expression could have frozen hell itself. Just moments before, she had unleashed a verbal assault on Jenny, the new server, a 19-year-old college student who'd accidentally brought her the wrong vintage of wine. The girl had stood there, trembling, as Sophia's voice sliced through her with surgical precision. "If you can't tell the difference between a 2015 and 2018 Bordeaux, perhaps you should consider a career that doesn't require functioning taste buds or brain cells." Jenny had fled to the kitchen in tears, and something inside Alexander snapped. Not the explosive kind of snap that makes headlines for all the wrong reasons, but the quiet kind that changes everything. The kind that comes when a man who's spent years swallowing his voice finally decides to use it. Now, as the entire restaurant watched this impossible standoff, Sophia's ice blue eyes narrowed to slits. She set down her wine glass with the deliberate care of someone loading a weapon. "Excuse me." Her voice was silk wrapped around steel. "Did you just refuse to serve me?" Alexander didn't flinch. Behind him, he could sense his manager approaching, could feel the weight of every guest's stare, could practically hear his employment hanging by a thread. But he'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. "I'm refusing to serve your anger," he said quietly. "Your coffee will be ready when you're ready to receive it with respect for the people bringing it to you." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was loud with possibility. Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying him like a chess master analyzing an unexpected move. She was used to intimidation, to people backing down, to money and power clearing every obstacle in her path. But this man, this server whose name she didn't even know, was looking at her like she was just another human being having a bad day. "Do you have any idea who I am?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Yes," Alexander replied simply. "You're someone who's forgotten what it feels like to be seen as human instead of powerful." The restaurant might as well have been struck by lightning. Phones appeared from nowhere. Someone in the corner was definitely recording. A woman at table 8 slowly lowered her napkin, her mouth slightly open. The maitre d' looked like he might faint. Sophia's perfectly manicured fingers drummed once, twice on the white tablecloth. Then she stood, her movements fluid and controlled, like a predator deciding whether to pounce or retreat. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Alexander nodded, accepting her threat with the same calm he'd shown throughout their exchange. "Maybe," he said, "but at least I'll sleep while knowing I stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for herself." With that, he turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving Sophia standing alone beside her untouched dinner, the eyes of 50 strangers boring into her back. Behind him, he heard the scrape of her chair, the sharp click of her heels against marble, and the whoosh of the restaurant's front door closing with finality. In the kitchen, chaos waited. Jenny sat on a milk crate, mascara streaking down her cheeks, while Marie, the head chef, paced like a caged lion. "Alexander, what the hell just happened out there?" Marie demanded. "Do you know who that woman is?" Sophia Kellerman could buy this restaurant with her lunch money. Alexander set down the coffee pot and leaned against the steel prep counter, suddenly feeling every ounce of adrenaline drain from his system. "I know exactly who she is," he said quietly. "And I know what she just did to a 19-year-old kid was wrong. Wrong or not, you just committed career suicide." Marie snapped. "She owns half the tech companies in this city. One phone call from her, and you'll be blacklisted from every decent restaurant." Alexander pulled out his phone and checked the time. 7:30. He needed to pick up Hannah from soccer practice in an hour, help her with her science project, and listened to her ramble about her day while they shared a bowl of ice cream before bed. That was his real job. Everything else was just survival. Maybe, he said, untying his apron. But I've got a daughter who's watching how I move through this world. I'd rather explain unemployment than explain why I stood by and watched someone get humiliated. 20 minutes later, Alexander sat in his aging Honda Civic outside the soccer field, watching Hannah weave through orange cones with the focused determination of someone who'd inherited his stubborn streak. His phone buzzed incessantly with texts from coworkers, notifications from social media apps he rarely checked, and missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Word was spreading faster than he'd imagined possible. He ignored it all until Hannah's practice ended, and she bounded toward the car, grass stains on her knees and pure joy radiating from her face. "Dad, Coach says I'm getting better at corner kicks. And guess what? Sarah's mom is taking us for ice cream after tomorrow's game if it's okay with you." Alexander smiled, feeling some of the day's tension melt away. "Sounds perfect, kiddo. How was school?" "Fine. Except Tommy Martinez said his dad saw something funny on the internet about someone who looks like you yelling at a rich lady. But that's weird because you never yell at anyone." Hannah buckled her seatbelt and looked at him with the piercing curiosity that only 8-year-olds possess. "Right, Dad?" Alexander's stomach dropped. It had been less than 2 hours, and the story was already reaching elementary school gossip networks. He glanced at his phone and saw 17 missed calls. This was bigger than he'd thought. "Sometimes adults have disagreements, sweetheart," he said carefully, pulling out of the parking lot. "But no, I didn't yell at anyone. I just reminded someone to be kind." "Good," Hannah said, settling back in her seat. "Mom always said kindness is free but worth everything." The mention of Rebecca hit him like it always did, a brief, sharp ache that had softened over the 3 years since cancer had taken her, but never fully disappeared. Rebecca would have been proud of what he'd done tonight, even if it cost him his job. She'd always been the one to stand up to bullies, to speak truth to power, to remind him that integrity mattered more than comfort. At home, their small apartment felt like a sanctuary. Hannah immediately claimed the living room floor for homework while Alexander started dinner. It wasn't until she was safely absorbed in long division that he finally allowed himself to check his phone. The video was everywhere. Someone had captured the entire confrontation, and it was spreading across social platforms faster than he could track. The comments were a battlefield. Half the internet was calling him a hero. The other half was calling him an unprofessional troublemaker. But the view count kept climbing. 200,000, 500,000, 800,000. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Chen? This is David Rodriguez from Channel 7 News. We'd love to schedule an interview about your confrontation with Sophia Kellerman tonight. Are you available tomorrow morning?" Alexander hung up without answering. The phone immediately rang again. Different number, same request. Then another, and another. "Dad." Hannah appeared in the kitchen doorway, homework apparently forgotten. "Why do people keep calling?" "Just work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But even as he said it, Alexander knew his quiet life was about to become very complicated. Across town, in a glass tower that scraped the sky like an accusatory finger, Sophia Kellerman stood in her corner office, watching the city lights twinkle below like distant stars. The view usually calmed her, reminded her of how far she'd climbed from the foster homes and group facilities of her childhood. Tonight, it felt like she was looking down at a world that was suddenly, inexplicably angry with her. "The video has been viewed 1.2 million times in 4 hours, her assistant, Marcus, said from behind her. His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering bad news to someone who could destroy careers with a word. "The hashtag is trending globally, and the board wants to speak with you first thing tomorrow morning." Sophia didn't turn around. She'd built Keller Tech from nothing, had survived hostile takeovers, market crashes, and competitors who'd tried to bury her. But this felt different. This wasn't a business problem she could solve with strategy and ruthlessness. This was something else entirely. "What are they saying?" she asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. "The comments are divided. Some people are defending you, saying you were just having a bad day. Others are calling you everything from an elitist monster to the poster child for corporate cruelty. The server, Alexander Chun, he's being called everything from a hero to an attention-seeking opportunist. Have we found anything on him? Criminal background, financial troubles, anything we can use. Clean as a whistle. Single father, lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago, works 2 jobs to support his daughter. Former high school teacher before his wife got sick. No criminal record, no debt beyond normal medical bills, no social media presence worth mentioning. By all accounts, he's exactly what he appears to be. Sophia finally turned from the window. At 36, she'd learned to weaponize her appearance just as effectively as her intelligence. Tonight, her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup was armor, and her suit was worth more than most people made in a month. But for the first time in years, she felt small. And what exactly does he appear to be? A good man who had enough? Marcus said simply. The words hit her harder than any corporate attack ever had. She walked to her desk, a slab of imported marble that had once belonged to a railroad baron, and sank into her chair. Schedule the board meeting for 8 a.m. And Marcus? Find out everything you can about Alexander Chen's daughter. School, activities, everything. But quietly. Ma'am, with respect, that might not be the best dash, just do it. After Marcus left, Sophia opened her laptop and watched the video again. And again, each time, she saw something different. The first viewing, she'd focused on her own humiliation, the way she looked, the things she'd said. The second time, she noticed the other diners' reactions. The third time, she watched the server, Jenny, the girl who'd made the mistake that started everything. But it was the fourth viewing that broke something open inside her. This time, she watched Alexander. Really watched him. The way he'd positioned himself between her and the girl. The calm in his voice even as he defied her. The absence of cruelty in his eyes, even as he stood his ground. I don't serve cruelty, ma'am. Only coffee and kindness. She closed the laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows again. Somewhere out there, Alexander Chun was probably helping his daughter with homework, reading bedtime stories, doing all the normal, beautiful things that normal people did. When was the last time she'd done something normal? When was the last time she'd been kind just because kindness mattered? The answer was uncomfortable. She couldn't remember. Alexander woke at 5 a.m. to the sound of his phone buzzing against the nightstand like an angry wasp. The notifications had multiplied overnight. 15 million views. Interview requests from every major network. A GoFundMe page someone had started without his permission. Death threats and love letters in equal measure. He deleted everything and focused on what mattered, getting Hannah ready for school. Dad, Ashley's mom says you're famous now, Hannah announced over her cereal. She saw you on the computer. Is that true? Alexander sat across from her with his coffee, studying her face for signs of confusion or worry. But Hannah looked more curious than concerned, and he decided to keep his explanation simple. Sometimes when adults do something people think is important, it gets talked about a lot. But it doesn't change anything important. I'm still your dad. You're still my favorite person in the universe, and we still have normal Wednesday things to do. Like what? Like you have that spelling test today, and tonight we're going to build that volcano for your science project. Hannah grinned. The one that's going to explode with baking soda? The very same. Alexander reached across the table and ruffled her hair. And no amount of internet attention is going to make me miss watching you impress Mrs. Patterson with your scientific genius. After dropping Hannah at school, Alexander drove to Lou Bernardine with his resignation letter already written. He owed Marie that courtesy, at least. But when he walked through the employee entrance, he found the kitchen buzzing with energy instead of the funeral atmosphere he'd expected. Alexander. Marie rushed toward him, her face flushed with excitement. Thank God you're here. We need to talk. I know, he said, pulling the letter from his jacket pocket. I'm sorry about last night. I'll clean out my locker and dash. Put that away, Marie interrupted. You're not going anywhere. Do you have any idea what's happened since you left last night? Alexander frowned. I got fired. Marie laughed, actually laughed. Fired? Kid, you got us booked solid for the next 3 months. We've had 400 reservation requests since this morning. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. People want to meet the server who stood up to Sophia Kellerman. They want to eat where integrity still matters. Alexander stared at her. You're not serious. Dead serious. And that's not even the best part. Marie's eyes gleamed with something between amazement and disbelief. Sophia Kellerman called this morning. She wants to make a reservation. For tonight. And she specifically requested you as her server. The letter slipped from Alexander's fingers and fluttered to the kitchen floor like a white flag of surrender. She what? You heard me. 8 o'clock reservation, table for one, and she wants Alexander Chun to take her order. Marie's grin was predatory. Question is, are you brave enough to serve her? Alexander thought about Hannah's soccer game tomorrow, about the science project waiting at home, about the quiet life he'd built from the ruins of his previous existence. Then he thought about the girl who'd cried in this very kitchen last night, and the man in the video who'd finally found his voice. Yes, he said quietly, I'll serve her. The day passed in a blur of media attention and nervous energy. Alexander fielded exactly 3 interview requests, turning down all of them with polite but firm refusals. He wasn't interested in fame. He wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. He was interested in doing his job with dignity and getting home to his daughter. But as 8 o'clock approached, his hands began to shake. Sophia arrived precisely on time, and the restaurant fell silent the moment she walked through the door. She wore simple black tonight, elegant but understated, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe style. She looked, Alexander realized, almost nervous. The maitre d' showed her to table 12, the same table where everything had started. Alexander watched from the kitchen doorway as she settled into her seat, opened the menu, and then seemed to change her mind and close it again. You ready for this? Marie asked beside him. No, Alexander admitted, but I'm going anyway. He walked across the dining room aware that every eye in the restaurant was following his movement. Conversations died. Silverware paused. Even the ambient music seemed to lower its volume out of respect for whatever was about to happen. Good evening, he said when he reached her table, his voice steadier than he felt. Welcome back to Lou Bernardine. Sophia looked up, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, Alexander could see something different in her eyes. The ice was still there, but there were cracks in it now, and underneath, something that looked almost like uncertainty. Hello, Alexander, she said quietly. I believe I owe you an apology. It wasn't what he'd expected. He'd prepared for anger, for another confrontation, for anything except this quiet admission. You don't owe me anything, ma'am. I was just doing what felt right. No, she said, shaking her head. I owe you much more than an apology. I owe you a thank you. Alexander blinked. I'm sorry. Sophia gestured to the empty chair across from her. Would you sit with me for a moment? I promise I won't get you fired. Against every instinct screaming at him to maintain professional boundaries, Alexander sat. Around them, the restaurant held its collective breath. I've watched that video 47 times, Sophia said, her voice so quiet he had to lean forward to hear her. Each time, I see something different. But what I see most clearly is a moment when someone looked at me and saw exactly who I'd become, and then gave me a choice to be someone different. Alexander studied her face, searching for the manipulation, the angle, the corporate strategy hidden beneath her words. But all he saw was a woman who looked tired and lost, and strangely grateful. I don't understand, he said. I haven't been kind in a very long time, Sophia continued. I've been successful. I've been powerful. I've been feared and respected and admired. But I haven't been kind. And last night, for the first time in years, someone reminded me that kindness matters more than any of those other things. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I did some research on you today. I know about your wife. I know about your daughter. I know you used to teach high school history before life forced you into service work. She slid the envelope across the table. And I know that tomorrow is Hannah's science fair. Alexander's blood ran cold. How do you know about Dash? Because I had you investigated, Sophia said simply. Because that's what powerful people do when someone challenges them. We gather information. We look for weaknesses. We prepare our counterattacks. She gestured to the envelope. Open it. With shaking hands, Alexander opened the envelope. Inside was a check made out to Hannah's school. The amount made him gasp out loud. $50,000, Sophia said, for the school's science and technology program. Because a man who raises a daughter while working 2 jobs to pay medical bills shouldn't have to worry about whether her school has the resources to nurture her curiosity. Alexander stared at the check, his mind racing. I can't accept this. This is Dash. It's not charity, Sophia interrupted. It's an investment. In a father who remembers what integrity looks like. In a daughter who's learning from the best possible example. And in a school that's lucky enough to have both of them. Alexander looked up at her, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Why are you doing this? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried years of carefully hidden pain. Because I grew up in foster care, bouncing from family to family, never staying anywhere long enough to belong. And I learned early that if you want to survive, you have to be harder than everything trying to break you. I got so good at being hard that I forgot how to be human. She paused, and Alexander saw her hands trembling slightly on the white tablecloth. Last night, you showed me what I'd lost. And more importantly, you showed me it wasn't too late to find it again. She met his eyes. I want to be the kind of person who builds people up instead of tearing them down. But I've forgotten how. And I was hoping that maybe, if you were willing, you could remind me. The restaurant around them had faded into background noise. This wasn't about fame or viral videos or corporate damage control. This was about two people, each recognizing something essential in the other. What are you asking? Alexander said quietly. I'm asking if you'd be willing to have dinner with someone who's trying to remember how to be kind. Not as a server and a customer, but as two people who both know what it's like to rebuild their lives from broken pieces. Alexander thought about Hannah, probably working on her volcano project with the neighbor who watched her after school. He thought about Rebecca, who'd always believed in second chances and the power of kindness to transform even the hardest hearts. And he thought about the man he wanted to be, not just for his daughter, but for himself. Okay, he said, but I choose the restaurant. Sophia smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. Deal. 3 weeks later, Alexander stood in the gymnasium of Hannah's elementary school, watching his daughter explain the volcanic properties of baking soda and vinegar to a panel of impressed judges. Her presentation board, professionally printed thanks to the school's new equipment, showed detailed diagrams and photographs from their weekend trip to the Natural History Museum. And this is the chemical reaction that creates the eruption, Hannah said with the confidence of someone who'd practiced her speech a dozen times in front of her biggest fan. When sodium bicarbonate meets acetic acid, it produces carbon dioxide gas, which creates pressure that forces the mixture upward through the volcano's opening. The judges nodded approvingly, and Alexander felt his chest swell with pride. Behind him, someone began clapping slowly, and he turned to see Sophia standing at the back of the gymnasium. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail that made her look younger and more approachable than he'd ever seen her. She's remarkable, Sophia said when she reached him. You should be incredibly proud. I am, Alexander said, then added with a smile, though I had some help with the research materials. Over the past 3 weeks, their unlikely friendship had developed through a series of careful dinners and tentative conversations. Sophia had been true to her word, approaching their meetings with genuine curiosity about how to rebuild the parts of herself she'd lost. She'd listened to stories about Rebecca, had laughed at Hannah's knock-knock jokes, and had slowly begun to share pieces of her own carefully guarded history. The science fair ended with Hannah taking second place, an achievement that sent her bouncing around the gymnasium with barely contained excitement. As parents began to file out and students packed up their projects, Sophia approached their table. Hannah, she said, kneeling down to the little girl's eye level. I heard you won second place. Congratulations. Thank you. Hannah beamed. Did you see my volcano explode? It was so cool. And Dad says the new microscopes at school came from a donation you made. I was happy to help, Sophia said. Your school is lucky to have students like you. Hannah studied Sophia with the frank curiosity of childhood. Dad says you're learning how to be nicer. Are you getting better at it? Alexander felt his face flush with embarrassment. Hannah, we don't dash. It's okay, Sophia laughed. She's right. I am learning how to be nicer. And your dad is an excellent teacher. Good, Hannah said seriously. Because nice people are more fun to be around. And Dad needs more fun friends. As they walked to the parking lot together, Alexander found himself marveling at how dramatically his life had changed in just a few weeks. The viral video had died down, the interview requests had stopped, and life had returned to a new normal, one that unexpectedly included regular dinners with one of the most powerful women in the country. I have something to tell you, Sophia said as they reached her car. The board voted yesterday. I'm stepping down as CEO of Keller Tech. Alexander stopped walking. What? Because running a company the way I was running it was killing the part of me that I'm trying to rebuild. Sophia leaned against her car, and Alexander could see both relief and uncertainty in her expression. I'm staying on as founder and majority shareholder, but I'm bringing in someone else to handle day-to-day operations. Someone who understands that companies work better when they're built on trust instead of fear. What will you do? I'm starting a foundation. Educational initiatives for kids in foster care and underserved communities. I want to use everything I've learned about building successful organizations to help kids who are growing up the way I did. She paused, and I was hoping you might consider joining me. Alexander blinked. I'm sorry, not as a server, Sophia said quickly. As an educator. As someone who understands how to connect with kids and help them believe in themselves. The foundation will need people who remember that kindness and competence aren't mutually exclusive. Alexander looked across the parking lot to where Hannah was attempting to stuff her volcano project into their Honda Civic, her tongue poking out in concentration. The offer was tempting, more tempting than he wanted to admit. But it was also terrifying. I don't know anything about running a foundation, he said. Neither do I, Sophia admitted. But I know how to hire smart people and listen to good advice. And you know how to see potential in people who've been overlooked. She straightened up, and Alexander caught a glimpse of the executive she'd been, decisive and compelling. Think about it. There's no rush. But I think we could do something really important together. That night, as Alexander helped Hannah glue the final pieces of her volcano project back together after its successful demonstration, he found himself thinking about second chances and the unexpected ways life could change direction. Dad, Hannah said, carefully positioning a plastic dinosaur next to her papier-mâché mountain. I like Sophia. She seems sad sometimes, but in a way that makes you want to help her feel better. What makes you say that? Alexander asked, though he'd noticed the same thing. She looks at you the way you used to look at Mom, Hannah said matter-of-factly. Like she's grateful you exist. Alexander's hands stilled on the craft supplies. Hannah it's okay, Dad. I know you miss Mom, but I think she'd like Sophia too. Mom always said the best people are the ones who are trying to be better than they used to be. Later that evening, after Hannah was asleep, Alexander sat on his small balcony with a cup of coffee and his phone. Sophia had texted him a link to an article about education inequality, along with a simple message. This is why the foundation matters. As he read about kids aging out of foster care without the resources to continue their education, about talented students whose potential was being wasted due to lack of opportunity, about the systemic barriers that kept capable people from building the lives they deserved, Alexander felt something shift inside him. He thought about the viral video that had started everything, about the moment when he decided that standing by silently was no longer an option. He thought about Hannah, growing up in a world that needed more people willing to speak up for kindness and justice. And he thought about Sophia, brilliant and driven and determined to use her second chance to make a difference. Maybe it was time for his own second chance too. Alexander picked up his phone and typed a simple message. I'm in. When do we start? The response came back almost immediately. Tomorrow. Thank you, Alexander, for everything. Outside his window, the city hummed with its endless energy. Millions of people trying to build meaningful lives from whatever materials they'd been given. And in a small apartment where second chances were blooming like unexpected flowers, a single father who'd found his voice was getting ready to help others find theirs too. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when no one is recording. Sometimes the most significant changes begin with the smallest acts of courage. And sometimes, when someone finally decides to serve kindness instead of cruelty, it changes more than just one difficult evening in an expensive restaurant. It changes everything.